Hi guys, as I mentioned before, I would post a video on how to make your windshield a little easier and quicker to take off. When I got this bike, I didn't like the way that the windshield came off because you needed a bunch of tools and it seemed to take longer than what I wanted. So with that said, this is a 2005 Honda VTX 1300R. I'm guessing most of these windshields are very similar. On this side of the bike, I've just put this bolt in here to show you an example of how the bike came. This is a little longer, obviously, than what it was, but if I recall correctly, it was a hex head bolt that you would need a wrench to take on and off. Below that, right here, if you can see, it was a nut and a bolt. Nut on the inside, bolt on the outside, went through, and for that you would need 2 wrenches, obviously, to get it on and off. Again, I didn't like this setup. So what I have done on this side of the bike, as you will see, for the top one, have installed an acorn nut that I can take on and off by hand. With this rubber grommet in there, it acts as a lock washer. I've had this set up like this for about 3 years. Not once have I had an issue of any of this coming loose or off. Below that here is a plunger pin, if I recall the correct term for it, and that looks just like this. This is the one from the other side, and how this works is you push this little trigger at the back of the pin, which allows these 2 ball bearings to compress and retract. So when I push it in, I just push that little trigger at the back, the ball bearings compress, and then it cannot come out. So here is a little list of the tools that I needed to do this. These are just the wrenches here as an example of how I used to have to take it off. But the tools that I used were a deep socket, another regular socket, ball peen hammer, a drill, grinder, and a caliper. So for this top bolt, where I had just the hex head bolt holding it in, what I've done for that is I went out and bought an acorn nut that is similar to the acorn nuts, if you can see them, that are on the bracket to the windshield. And I did that so that it somewhat matches the bike. Along with that, I went out and I bought a socket head cap screw. So what I did is I measured the inside diameter of that acorn nut with the calipers, and then I took the socket head cap screw, chucked it in a drill, and after measuring the diameter of that socket head cap screw, I proceeded to turn the drill on and grind that socket head cap screw outside diameter until it was roughly 0.010 of an inch larger than the inside diameter of that acorn, which allowed me to give it a press fit. Once the head of that socket head cap screw was turned down to that diameter, I rested the acorn nut in the socket. with the acorn nut in the socket, keeping in mind this is not installed yet. This is just an example. So with the acorn nut in there without the socket head cap screw, I rested that socket head cap screw down into the threads of the acorn nut, took this socket and I pounded the socket head cap screw into the acorn nut, which turned into this. Now with this, again, you come over to the bike. I took out their hex head bolt and I put this in, which now allows me to thread that in by hand with no tools. Comes in and out in seconds. No tools needed. Like that a lot better. Now for this bottom one, where they had the nut and the bolt, that is where that plunge pin, like this, comes in. What I've done here, and I seem to have misplaced the reamer. If you guys are not familiar with the reamer, it turns an inside diameter to a precise diameter after pre-drilling the hole. Now you don't necessarily have to ream the hole. What you could do is just use a drill bit, but keeping in mind if you use a drill bit, do it in increments so that you can get that diameter as close to the 3/8 diameter that this pin is. So again, what I've done with that, I took my reamer and I did each side at a time, having everything bolted in so that it would mimic the sitting position of the windshield once everything's installed. So I took this nut and bolt out and I reamed this hole, which is, there's a little spacer on the bracket of the windshield, and then there is a clearance hole in the bracket that's mounted on the bike. So I took that reamer and I reamed the inside of this diameter on the bracket of the bike as well as the bracket on the windshield to a precise 3/8 of an inch. Now these plunge pins, keep in mind, they are a little bit pricey. I believe I paid $30 a piece at a fastener shop here in Windsor. So now that this diameter is reamed, you can now take this plunge pin, push it in. It actually goes in fairly easy, but because I'm holding my phone to make this video, I'm having a little problem getting it in. But I assure you that with two hands, that plunge pin comes in and out in seconds, 3-4 seconds. So now, with this plunge pin installed and this acorn nut installed, I can literally take this windshield off and on within 20 to 30 seconds. I didn't have to go out and buy the quick release windshield that they charge us hundreds of dollars for. It did cost me, again, roughly $60, and the bulk of that price was in the plunge pin here. Again, I believe they were $20 or $30 a piece. So it ended up costing me roughly $60 to $70 to do this, and maybe an hour of my time. I hope this video helps everybody out. If you have any questions, feel free to post them on the page that I put this on. And I hope it works out for you guys. All right, thanks. Bye.